Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this evening's live stream. It's myself and yourselves this evening, so I look forward to your comments. We don't have any guests joining us. As ever, there is plenty in the news. Our title tonight, Gambling, Corridor Wandering and Football in the Parliament. So some slightly unusual topics, a bit off the beaten track to talk about this evening. So where should we start? I'll just run through a bit of family party news. We've got an event in Edinburgh on Thursday night this week, which is the 21st of August. I think it starts at 7 p.m. in the Cali Picture House on Lothian Road. The Wetherspoons there. There's no sort of particular agenda, mainly a sort of social gathering, but I'm sure we'll talk about some family party business as well while we're there. So that's Thursday in Edinburgh. 14th of September, we've got a meeting in Aberdeen, again in the Wetherspoons, the one just by Castlegate. I can't remember his name. So we'd be very welcome to join us there. I think that starts at 8 p.m. And the other thing to mention is to save the date. 8th of November is our conference in Glasgow. So west side of Glasgow. Do join us for that. We've just had an afternoon conference for a few years, but we're going for a full day this time. So it would be great to see you there. Right, what else is going on in the family party? I mean, the big thing this term, now until Christmas, is gearing up for the Scottish election. We'll finalise our candidates for the different regions. Obviously, the regional list is our main focus as a relatively small party. So the candidates in the first place on our list in a region, or maybe in second place as well, these are the people who will want to be able to go out and take part in hustings or do interviews, these sort of things. So we'll be selecting, finalising our choices for people to be, at the sharp end of our regional lists for the election in the next few weeks. So if that's maybe something you want to think about, keep your eye on your communications. These communications obviously will only go to members and regular donors. We won't publicise this more widely. So keep your eye on your emails, and you'll get an email if you're a member. If you're not a member, obviously go to our website and sign up. You'll get an email as a member telling you about how to get involved in being a candidate and the campaign to camp. Right, that's what's the thing going on with the family party up until Christmas is we're going through our policy review process. Now, we've got our policy book, which we've updated over the years, quite a substantial document now. I think it's, I think we rightly feel quite proud of it. Very well put together, well thought through. A lot of expertise in different areas have gone into it. But we need to extend it considerably for the Scottish election. We need to update it and extend into some new areas. So this is my copy. I've made a few notes on the front page there. That's areas where we're going to be developing new policies in the next few months. And you're welcome to join in and take part in that. I was in the Conservative Party years and years ago, and all they ever did was invite me to buy raffle tickets and to go to balls. Basically, that was it. There was no political activity or political input. But we're totally the opposite of that. I don't think you'll ever be asked to buy a family party raffle ticket. We'll come on to that later, maybe. But you are invited to take part in helping set our policy. So one of the ways we do that is with a Facebook group, a secret Facebook group. Again, as a member or a donor, you'll be invited to join that. A lot of you will be members already. So that group will become very active over the next few weeks as new policies are posted there, and you can tell us what you think. We'll do some of that at the conference as well. There'll be the opportunity for delegates to have an input into our proposed policies. So do take part in that. Right. Good evening, Lisa from East Lothian. I was over in East Lothian last week one day, went to North Berwick. Very nice it was. Indeed, idyllic, in fact. Right, so what have we got to talk about tonight? An awful lot. So where do we start? I've got a few quick stories to get warmed up as usual. You probably saw this one. A Liverpool fan, or person in Liverpool in any case, allegedly hurled some racist abuse at a footballer in the Premiership, English Premiership, and the match was stopped. I think this seems a bit strange to me, that someone can say some words from the stand and it stops the football game. Now, if these words were something like, "I've got a bomb and I'm going to blow you all up," then okay, yeah, maybe that might be cause for pausing the game. But to stop a Premiership football game because someone says something racist, I mean, that's handing an awful lot of power to the most rebellious and irresponsible and unpleasant person in the crowd, isn't it? So anyone in that crowd knows that they've got the option, if they want to, assuming if they're near enough to the players, they can stop the match. Now, it's not impossible. You might get some fanatical fan that will think, actually, right, the team's ahead, or that my team's behind. I'd actually like this match to be null and void. I'd like this match not to finish off properly. So I know I'll hurl some racist abuse in, and then the match will stop. I mean, it just seems a bit crazy to me. I mean, football crowds, I know a lot of perfectly decent people go and watch football, but in football crowds in general, there is generally a pretty unpleasant atmosphere, and hurling the most offensive, abusive comments, insults at each other is perfectly normal. I mean, that's what goes on in football matches. So I fear that what's going on here is one player might come up and the people will just say the most offensive and hurtful things they can think of about that player and that player's wife or mother or whatever, the worst things they can think of. And they just have to play on. They have to ignore it and play on. But then when someone says something racist, the whole match stops and the police swing into action. Now, I never really get that. If you're going to have a law against saying appallingly hurtful, offensive, and really horrible things to people, if you're going to have a law about that, then surely it should be a blanket law to protect everyone equally, rather than just focusing on race. Because it's as if you can say, I mean, I used to get this when I was teaching as a housemaster. You get, boys have had a fight, and what started the fight, and they'll have had some argument, and they'll get to the stage where they just say the most horrible thing they can possibly think of about the other person or their family, their mother, their sister, whatever, really below the belt stuff. And eventually one of the boys would lose the temper and thump the other one. And sometimes I felt that what I was supposed to do was say, oh, the boy who thumped him, he's the one in real trouble. But the other boy, like saying all these really appalling things, he's not so much to blame. I tend to think, well, actually, I'm not so sure, actually. If you're going to provoke someone like that, then don't be surprised if someone smacks you one. So you might end up punishing them both or whatever. But it's the same with race as well. You get the situation where people are saying the most horrible things to each other, but then as soon as one of them's racist, then that's the only one they have to pounce on and deal with. So it's a tricky one. I mean, how do you even begin to police the behavior of football fans and what football fans scream at each other in stadia? Very, very difficult. I mean, I agree it's a problem. I agree you want to try and sort it out, but, well, I'm not quite sure I've got the answer. But I think that what's going on here in the longer term is not going to be effective. It's going to become a bit of a game to play at the football matches. I mean, one of the recent things I was quite disgusted to learn, I think it was one of the Dundee teams, when Queen Elizabeth II died, they were chanting "Lizzie's in a box" at a match somewhere. I think it might have been Ibrox. I mean, utterly disgusting, appalling behaviour. I mean, we're in Scotland. You don't need to hear anything about bad behaviour by football fans, do you? So yes, definitely a problem to be addressed. But I'm not sure this laser, I would say, sort of slightly hysterical, over the top response just to racism is going to help. Absolutely. I mean, that's the issue. Is it's a protected characteristic. So saying something utterly obscene about someone's mother or sister or partner or whatever, wife, well, that's not a protected characteristic. So you can say that. So you like that. Police are not interested. But if you say something about their race, I mean, maybe even religion, or, I don't know, then that's a hate crime, hate speech. Maybe they'll swing into action. But the whole thing just doesn't make sense. And if this keeps happening at top-level football games, it will become a bit of a game for some people. And, it's not going to work out well. Right. Good evening. Nice to see you. Right, so that was that story. What else have we got? Right, this is another, I guess, not entirely unrelated sort of stories. This is from a protest in Falkirk, where there's a hotel with asylum seekers. They call them asylum seekers. I mean, let's face it, they're illegal immigrants. They've been housed in Falkirk, and some local residents are unhappy about that. I would say to a degree with good reason. If you imagine you took, let's say, a couple of hundred Scottish 19-year-old boys who were, the sort who'd break the law if they thought they could make a bit of money out of it. Say there's a couple of hundred of Scottish 19-year-old boys and put them all in a hotel in, I don't know, pick your country, Saudi Arabia, China, whatever. And they're not allowed to get a job. and they don't really fit in. They're just going to live in this hotel on meager resources and like wander around trying to entertain themselves. How would that go? It wouldn't go well, would it? It would not go well. There would be all sorts of problems. They would be causing big. Let's say it was Saudi Arabia. They'd find some way of getting hold of alcohol, and Saudi Arabia would find, it has a drunkenness problem in that area that it never normally has. They'd probably find graffiti coming up all over the place. Again, even in a place where they might say, we never had this before, till we had those boys from Scotland come into this hotel. We never had these problems. How would they treat the local girls? Well, mixed. Let's put it that way. Is it possible that this hotel full of boys, there might be a bit over enthusiastic, shall we say, and their approaches made to local girls? Very, very possibly. So this is not some sort of, look at these bad people from other countries. This is something like inherent in the demographics and just practicalities of this situation. Having said that, I think people from some cultures, there are particular problems that tend to manifest. So I think the concerns of these local residents are very reasonable. I would never go along to a protest like that, because I would fear that in among the protests there would be some unpleasant elements. There'd be racism and some really sort of angry, spoiling for a fight type people. So I wouldn't want to go. And that banner there sums it up, doesn't it? Kill them all. I mean, not exactly helpful. That could be illegal. Incitement to violence. We'll come on to another case about that in a minute. But this is what happens at protests. We found this with the family party. We would take part in protests along with other organizations and other individuals. And we'd find, we know a lot of the people and we know they'd be fine. But then you find there's other people around, or someone else has asked someone else to speak, and you end up standing there thinking, oh dear, I don't want to be really associated with this. This is pretty grim. Then you get people who come to it, and they're not great either. So we've tended to think we would rather do our own event, with 10 people, 20 people, 30 people, 40 people. But we know it's the Scottish Family Party. We know who's there. It's us. It's our messages. It's our speakers. We're in control of it. We'd rather that than to have 100, 200, or 300 or 400 people, but be sort of out of control and to be wincing sometimes at what people are saying. And the media will jump on that. Maybe this protest in Fort Kirk, maybe everyone else was pretty civil and it was all fine, but the media are going to home in on that one person. And that's what happens at big events, because these events tend to attract, as well as reasonable people, they'll tend to attract people with very extreme views. The other thing as well is, to be honest, they tend to attract people with some degree of mental health problems as well. It's true. It's true. And then people who want to present this movement or this protest in a bad light, well, this can often be a big bonus for them. Right, Jack, thousands of Koreans march in London for Make UK Whole Again. I saw that. Yeah, I know that was some two-way thing. There's people from Britain. I know Andrew Williams was over in South Korea as well, involved in that. They're very welcome to come along and pray and preach and make their voice known. Hello, Mr. Mellon. Who listens to Media Spin these days? I would say more people than we might like to think. I think it's tempting to think, mainstream media, no one watches that anymore. But to be honest, I think a very substantial majority of people, that's where they get their news. They'll catch a few lines of BBC News on the radio or just see a few headlines online here and there. But they don't follow any political content online, any current affairs content. So they're just getting snippets of headlines from BBC mainly, and other TV news. So maybe more than we think. Right. Let's see. This was interesting. So this is Rose Doherty, who was arrested in February, obviously, for allegedly breaking the buffer zone law. She was offered a warning by the Crown Office. They said, basically, if you'll admit you were breaking the law, we'll let you off with a warning. And Rose quite rightly said, nope, because I wasn't breaking the law. So they had another think about it. They scratched their heads. I think, obviously, they were thinking they weren't actually going to be able to make a case stick and actually get a successful prosecution. So they basically dropped the case for now. I'm going to make a video about this tomorrow. There's lots more to say about it, so I'll keep my powder dry. But I would say basically, I think a lot of the media commentary and the commentary by campaigners on this is getting it wrong. It's misunderstanding the situation and is misinterpreting it. People saying things like common sense has prevailed. No, common sense hasn't prevailed in this case. It's still absolutely, if Rose Doherty had stood there, if she'd had a sign that had anything to do with abortion, then she would have been prosecuted. Absolutely, definitely. The reason it hasn't been prosecuted is the sign that she had was ambiguous. And I'm not saying she would have done, I don't know what she'd have said in court, but they would have worried she might have gone to court and said, well, this has nothing to do with abortion. In which case they'd have had a job making their case stick. So basically the buffer zone law still stands. Common sense has not prevailed. But I'll talk about this a lot more in the video I'll make tomorrow. But one thing interesting, just before we leave this, I was quite intrigued by that photograph there. And I'm intrigued about it because who took it? Because I see you've got Rose in the middle there. You've got two police officers to the right. And I was just off screen, just out of the picture, by the police officer on the right. He was sort of holding his arm up to try and keep me at arm's length. And I kept moving so I could make sure I got the video of the handcuffs going on. And then a BBC, I think it was BBC photographer, arrived later and just got some footage of Rose being walked away to the car. And that seemed it. But this photograph was taken earlier. And I'm just thinking, who took it? So the thought crossed my mind, is this some sort of AI generated image? So you put in the video and it makes up a photograph from a different angle. But no, I don't think it is. I think it is a photograph. And maybe my memory is a bit vague. I'm not sure. Anyway, I found it quite intriguing to think, how did that photograph exist? And also, at the time of the arrest, I mean, that is the ultimate photograph. So why was that photograph not used at that time? So there's a mystery. We need Scooby-Doo on the case. I'm not suggesting some sort of dark conspiracy here, but I'm perplexed about how that happened. I'm not quite sure what was happening there. So, Jack, I saw this news. So this was the most premature baby ever born celebrated Noel. So I assume, his first birthday recently in Iowa. So that's great news there. I make some mockery of the abortion limit, which is not to say that I believe in any way, shape or form that the abortion time limit should be determined by viability. The value of the unborn child does not change at the point where they're viable. So, just to clarify that, because some people think, like Nigel Farage, he thinks viability is the key thing. So when Noel was born, does that suddenly mean that 21-week gestation fetuses around the world suddenly become valuable because Noel was born? Or do you have to wait until Noel's reached his first birthday before all the other 21-week-old fetuses become valuable? Is this a nonsense? Isn't it? It doesn't make any sense. It's logically incoherent. But it is what a lot of people think. Just while we're on that subject as well, a bit of a challenge for this viability thing as well is an abortion time limit. When does the fetus acquire value? Is there are babies who are born twice. I don't know if you're aware of that. I wasn't until relatively recently. There are some babies who are born twice. And what happens is some defect is detected in the womb. And so doctors can sometimes, cesarean section, bring the baby out of the womb, perform surgery or some sort of treatment, and then put the baby back in the womb and sew up again. And then the baby continues its gestation until full term and then is born naturally. Now, if you believe a baby acquires its human rights at the moment of birth, then when does the baby is born twice, do they get full human rights when they're taken out of the womb for the surgery? And then do they lose them again when they're put back in? And then gain them again when they're delivered at full term? Again, it's totally incoherent. I mean, there's no rationale that can justify this, but it's generally seen as a really obvious thing. It's not until baby's born that they gain their human rights, but the reasoning just falls to bits in that case. Anyway, I digress. So keep your eye open for videos tomorrow. I'll make a video about that tomorrow. I haven't made many standalone videos recently, but I've got a few in the pipeline now. So, yeah, this is interesting. The general trend in Scotland is that the Scottish government would like everyone, well, basically vaguely related or anywhere near to Scotland, to be able to vote. I mean, I think the Scottish government would let you vote if you're on holiday, if they had their way. But at the moment, you have to register to vote, and it's very easy to register to vote. And there's all sorts of encouragements and reminders to try to get people to register to vote, but there's still a significant number of people who don't do it. So what should be done? Now, one argument could be, well, if someone won't make the effort to just do a very simple process, or maybe isn't capable of following a very, very simple process to register, do they not forfeit the right to vote? I mean, is that like, it's a very, very, very low bar, but maybe it's some sort of bar to test people's competence and commitment in order to vote. And I would argue that there's maybe some sense in that. The thing is, with automatic registration, I mean, basically, who should be able to vote? Are they checking properly? If it's automatic registration, they basically, okay, give us your address. Here you are. Here's a polling card. So I worry, I haven't got evidence of this, but I would worry that the proper rules about who can vote, which are pretty lax in any case, particularly in Scottish and council elections, not so much for Westminster elections, I would worry that these things are not being properly tested in any case. And the voter registration has been given out like confetti to anyone who just says they would want it. Now, I think in a democracy, it's really important that the demos, the group of people who are allowed to have a say in the running of the country, that should be a defined group of people. And if that group of people is going to be expanded to include people who just arrived from other countries, or people who are not citizens or not permanently resident or whatever, then that really needs to be very clearly, I would say, almost a referendum, or yes, a referendum of the demos. Maybe even a referendum's not enough. Maybe you need some sort of supermajority to change the group who are allowed to vote. So we've got slight concerns about that, but we will see. We'll see how it goes. But there's some people who think children should be able to vote. As soon as they can express a desire to vote and understand what it is, they should be able to go and vote, which is obviously open to total exploitation by adults who'll just tell the kids, this is what we're going to do, and the kids will say the right things, and they will go to vote. So mixed feelings about this. Now, in terms of voting, I'm going to come on to this later as well. Recently, you've had to take photo ID to vote, and I think that's absolutely right. Having a system where you can just turn up and say who you are and your address, and they'll let you vote, I think that's really crazy. So taking ID, I think absolutely right. Now, governments for years, they've said, let's have a digital ID card system, like a citizenship card. And two groups of people oppose it, basically. People from the left and the right who say, no, liberty, that's an infringement of our liberties. It's state overreach. The government would have too much control over us. No, we don't want that. The other people, you get some sort of conspiracy theories grow up around them as well. But people also say, what if you get a bad government? Okay, it's fair enough while we've got a relatively benign government. What if you get some tyrannical government in the future? You don't want them to have all this information to use. I think the answer to that is, if you do get this tyrannical government in the future, well, they'll introduce it in any case. It won't matter to them whether it's already existed. They'll do it in any case. But your passport and your driver's license, they function like your national ID card already. But the problem is not everyone has a passport. You don't necessarily have to have one. Not everyone has a driving license. So there's a big gap in the system. So it's a bit of a problem. So I'm tending to think, would it not be better to have an ID card onto which your capacity to drive is recorded, and it would serve as your passport as well? I mean, would that not be more sensible? I'm going to talk about illegal immigration. Well, actually, I missed that one. So the thing about illegal immigration, but this is a really good way to control immigration. For the moment, illegal immigrants, they can sort of filter in, and eventually they can get register in various ways with the state and can sort of get on with life, even though they shouldn't actually be here. But if you have an ID card like this would make it very difficult. It would enable the government to actually control who's here, who should be here, and who shouldn't be here. So for NHS treatment, if you got run over by a car, people in the ambulance are not going to come and say, show us your card. But when you're in hospital, that would be part of the process. Okay, let's just get your number. Let's just check. And I think that would be useful. So I'm tending to lean towards thinking like an ID card, a national citizenship card, if you like, could be a positive thing. It would enable things to be controlled much more carefully. Now, the problem with like a government like the Scottish government, they say we'll just give them out like confetti. So that will be another issue. But even in that case, I think it could have some value. So we will we'll put that in our policy review. Tell me what you think. Tell me what you think. Right. Hello, Mr. and Mrs. 11. Any thoughts on guardrails against the rising anti-Semitism on the right? I think it's very concerning. Very concerning. I think anti-Semitism, you get it on the left. You don't have to go too far left to start finding anti-Semitism. On the right wing, you have to go quite a long way right, far, far right, to find anti-Semitism. But it's coming more in the guise of like the sort of conspiracy movements, like the sort of people who want to take the opposite of what everyone else is saying. They want to take a minority view on everything. And in the conspiracy mindset, there's always someone behind it all. Who's pulling the strings? And often it ends up with the Jews. Sometimes people say, the global elite. But then if you keep looking at what they mean the Jews. So anti-Semitism on the extreme right wing, I think it's largely an online phenomenon at the moment. But it's beyond what it used to be. Anti-Semitism, it would be like hardcore Nazi types, and you would recognize them, in the way they act, the way they dress, etc. But now it's sort of mainstreaming a little bit. You get the sort of Second World War revisionists as well. So I think it's very dangerous and very concerning. So let's see where that goes. I say it's more of a thing in America than in Britain at the moment, but it is getting a foothold in Britain as well. I mean, another group where anti-Semitism is a problem is Muslims, because of Muhammad spent a lot of time fighting against Jews, and he made some very harsh comments about Jews. Some Muslims say those comments were about those particular Jews he was fighting with at that particular time. But a lot of Muslims take them to mean a general blanket, we don't like the Jews and we never will type of attitude. So that's one concern. Then you've got the left wing, and then you've got the extreme right wing, and then you've got the conspiracy theory elements as well. So between them all, it's very concerning. But we've certainly got no time for that in the Scottish Family Party. Right, let's have a look at this. Right, Jack. Genocide and starvation in Congo, Syria, Lebanon, Libya, Yemen. It's only news when it's the Jews. Yes, I think that tends to be the thing, isn't it? Like the Gaza conflict is treated completely differently than others. Now, Gaza, I'll say very briefly about that. I think after the October the 7th attacks on Israel, which were by the Gaza isn't a state, but it sort of functions as one. So it was a state action. It wasn't some terrorist group acting on their own. It was a state action. So Israel's retaliation, that is a just war. It is possible to conduct a just war in unjust ways. So whether or not Israel is being right, is morally justified in all of its actions, that's a different question. I won't even try and get into at the moment, but it is a just war. And the idea that you're going to fight a war until you remove the regime that attacked you, I think that's quite reasonable as well. Like at the end of the Second World War, the Allies attacked into Germany until Germany surrendered. Okay, they didn't say, "Oh well, we've gone far enough. We'll leave it here, and we'll leave Hitler in charge because we've taught him a lesson. So let's just leave it here." You don't do that. There's got to be a change there. So I think it is a just war, but within that, there are all sorts of questions that come around. That's not carte blanche to Israel to do what it's like. Right. So what are your thoughts on the pregnant robot stuff? Now, I get, is this artificial wombs? Is that what you're meaning? Fill me in a bit more what you mean there. I think you might mean artificial wombs. I mean, the technology of artificial wombs is developing. As far as I'm aware, it's some way away from being completely effective. When it is, some people say this could be like an end to the abortion dilemma. If a woman decides she doesn't want to be pregnant, and other people think, well, the unborn life has value, then you can just transfer the fetus into an artificial womb. Now you could still say the mother's she's not fulfilling her responsibility in giving the child up at that point, but that's just like giving a child up for adoption. To be honest, I tend to think this will go wrong. This whole idea will go wrong in various ways. But yeah, I mean, there could be situations where a baby is gestating, and then because of some health condition, the mother is unable to continue the pregnancy, or the baby would die because of some health condition related to the womb of the mother. But the baby's life could be saved by transfer into an artificial womb. Now, I wouldn't be surprised if Catholic teaching on that, when it catches up with it, would say that they don't approve of that because it's someone or something else intervening in the reproductive process. And Catholic teaching seems to be that you don't have anyone or anything else playing a part in the process. So it might be, I'm just speculating here, the Catholic teaching might be, no, that this is not permitted. My own view is I think there'd be some serious issues to address with it. There's some circumstances, like I just outlined, where it sounds reasonable and it sounds like a health treatment. In other words, a way of getting around a health problem and enabling survival and development where otherwise it might not have been possible. That sounds good. The idea of it as an alternative to abortion, or the other thing is you'll just get women who say, right, I fancy having a baby, but I don't fancy getting all fat and pregnant, so I'll have the machine do it for me. And I think the consequences for the child and for the mother will be negative, because I think there are all sorts of interactions, valuable interactions, formative interactions that take place in the womb with the mother. So I think that there would be problems emerging. Right, Robert, that Japan are developing. I haven't seen any news about that particularly recently, but I do know that there is work going on artificial wombs. So yeah, maybe I should look that up. Right, this is an interesting one. This is the legal case where the Supreme Court clarified the meaning of man and woman in the Equality Act, which is quite a narrow legal issue that's been grossly overplayed in the media, who tend to treat it as the Supreme Court said there's no such thing as transgender, there's only men and women, which is, they haven't said anything remotely like that. But then a transgender retired judge lodged an appeal against it, but that's been rejected. And I think this just illustrates how the law in these cases that descends into activism. You've got judges making decisions on things that are they really should be political issues. It should be the parliament deciding what this law is, not relying on judges to be straightening things out months later. But right, let's move on from that. In fact, let's go back to this one. It's interesting for me as well because I haven't been able to get pregnant after a miscarriage a few years ago. I don't think I would have a robot baby though. Yeah, it's interesting because in one sense it's using a technology to overcome a problem, which is generally that's what medicine is. That's what it's all about. But in this case, I think there are other questions to be asked. And I think how it would work out for the child and for the mother, I'm not sure. In fact, I would bet my house that if this becomes commonplace, the research will show less negative outcomes, less positive outcomes for the mother and for the child and their relationship. I would be virtually certain that would happen, as well as some abuses of the system as well. Interesting. Thank you for that. Scottish exam results have come out. As usual, the attainment gap hasn't really closed. So in the Parliament, they all take it for granted that closing the attainment gap is what it's all about. Even though it's a fool's errand, it's impossible to eliminate it completely. But it's still what they focus on. They should be focusing on highest possible standards of attainment for everyone against objective standards, and keep trying to push those standards up and up, make the exams a bit more demanding so that pupils really need to work. The teachers are in the mindset, right, this is really tough. Kids, we've got to get down to work. Otherwise, you're not going to do very well in this exam. Let's get on with it. Whereas the government and the whole Parliament are more concerned with, like social engineering. How can we make sure poor kids and rich kids get the same results? I've talked about that lots of times before. That's an ongoing story. Now, this is an interesting one. Gambling. I put this in the title, gambling. So this is from the website of the Christian Institute. Now, Christian Institute, I would normally agree with their stances on pretty well any issue. But I was quite interested to read this. So tell me what you think. So they say gambling is wrong, okay, morally wrong. Gambling is any activity in which wealth changes hands, mainly on the basis of chance and with risk to the gambler. Such activities include betting, fruit machines, lotteries, casino games, scratch cards, and card games and their online equivalents. Creative effort, using skills, and responsible investment are not integral factors. Okay, so they're explaining what the wrong thing is in gambling. Well, I think that definition, we can question it in this way. So if you go to the fairground and you throw a dart at something and you win a teddy, you pay £5, throw a dart, and if you're lucky, you win a great big teddy. Is that gambling? Because there's skill involved. Well, I would suggest actually it is gambling. Because for most people, they haven't got a clue about throwing a dart and they just reckon, oh, that looks a decent chance. Bit of fun. I'll go and have a go. So I'd question their definition there. It can still be gambling, even if a degree of skill is involved. You can even say like horse racing. Does it involve any skill? I mean, they could say it's not a useful skill. I mean, is throwing darts a useful skill? Okay, how about if it's like kicking a football in the goal? Maybe people could say that's a useful skill, but it would still be gambling. Anyway, that's a side issue. Let's carry on. There are 3 legitimate ways in which wealth may change hands: by giving, by working for it, or by genuine exchange, trade, which includes taxation. Right. Anything else is virtual theft, and so is breaking the 8th commandment. As has been said, gambling is a kind of robbery by mutual agreement. Gambling is a type of robbery by mutual agreement. I'm not sure you can rob someone with their agreement. If they've agreed to it, then you're not robbing them. That's consensual. And it says, but it's still robbery. It said, just as dueling, which is murder by mutual agreement, is still treated as murder. Okay. Right, I sort of disagree with that, because with murder, the act of killing someone is illegal. But with gambling, the act of giving someone some money is not normally illegal. So, in other words, they're saying just because it's called a duel doesn't make it legal. Just because it's called gambling doesn't make theft legal, but it's not theft. The person has chosen to give you that money under those circumstances. So I don't really get that. Anyway, so it says one of the 3 impulses behind gambling: the desire for gain. So 3 impulses: desire for gain, desire for a thrill, desire for competition. The moral and ethical problems are focused on the desire for gain. Right. What do you make of that? I was quite surprised at that. I mean, obviously, gambling is risky in many ways, and it causes a lot of social problems. So I think it is a moral issue in some ways. But for an outright black and white moral declaration that gambling was wrong, I was quite surprised with that. So I had to think about it. So in what ways could it be wrong? I don't particularly accept the argument the Christian Institute's put forward there. I think that the lottery, I think it stirs within people. It encourages people to live in a fantasy. I think that's unhelpful. So every time you buy a lottery ticket, you imagine being a multimillionaire and your life transformed. And people's hope can tend to be in that fantasy. And that's not healthy. But again, lots of things promote fantasies, TV programs, films. Is it absolutely morally wrong to live in a fantasy, encourage someone to live in a fantasy? Yeah, not quite sure there. How about it's wasting money, it's misusing money. Okay, to some degree, if you go to the amusement arcade at Portobello or whatever and put some 5p's or 10p's and the penny falls, I think it's sort of gambling. But also, I mean, I would see that as you're spending money for some entertainment. So you're spending a couple of pounds for, I don't know, like 10 minutes entertainment. And if you win a bit, you're probably going to put it all back in any case. So at the end of it, when you put all your winnings back in, you've got nothing left. You don't think, oh no, I lost. You're more likely to think, oh well, that was quite fun. Cost me a couple of pounds, you know. So what? Quite enjoyed that, and that's that. You go on your merry way. So is it wasting money? Spending money on something that's just pure entertainment isn't necessarily wasting money. So if someone sees gambling, if they see it like it's the money spent, so even if you lose, you've spent the money and you've gained enjoyment from that process of placing the bet and the excitement, seeing if you win. Okay, you didn't. You spent the money, but you're still happy with that. Then is that not okay? Interesting. I mean, I've sometimes had a reservation about like treating money as a toy. Something feels a bit distasteful about that because money is so important, so powerful, can do so much good, and it's such a serious matter for so many people that to treat it as a toy seems a bit inappropriate in some way. Not sure. Exploitation, definitely. I think if you're running a lottery or whatever, there's gambling things. It is exploiting people in some ways. It's exploiting their maybe current poverty. I heard someone say once, like the lottery is a tax on people who are bad at maths, and that's true. I think it can be something that takes money off people on a belief that the person running the operation knows that people are generally going to lose, but the person playing, they maybe don't understand probability theory, and they actually believe that their chance of winning is a lot greater. So that's a form of exploitation. People live in the fantasy, so they get addicted to it. So but selling things that are addicted, generally, I mean, chocolate can be addictive. Lots of things can be addictive. Alcohol, coffee. I mean, does that automatically make something wrong? Not necessarily. You need a bit more of a case from that. Undermines the idea of hard work. Okay, to some degree, yeah. I mean, I'm sure there are some people who, if they're forever trying to find like a quick buck, a get rich quick scheme, rather than getting a job and earning some money and being responsible. So yeah, and the addiction element, talked about that already. Very serious damage it does to individuals and families. I'm sure it generates more than its fair share of family breakdown, suicides, and mental health problems, all sorts of serious issues for the gambler and for people closely associated to them. So all those things, do they add up, in my mind, to a point-blank statement, gambling is wrong? In my mind, no, they don't. They don't. There are a lot of very serious moral considerations, as there are around, for example, alcohol. So you might want age restrictions. But then there's illegal drugs as well. Gambling is quite regulated in the UK. You can't have a fruit machine that you gamble £50 at a time because they think that would be too dangerous. So I think the current approach, where some forms of gambling are not allowed, is quite tightly regulated. Some forms are allowed at certain ages in certain contexts. I would tend to think that's the right balance. I would maybe shift the balance towards more restrictions. But the point-blank statement, gambling is wrong, can't quite get myself to that conclusion, I think. If someone decides for themselves, we're not going to gamble, or if a group says, in this group we're not going to gamble, then okay, fine. fine. But the gambling is wrong. Can't quite get there. Right, one flutter on the Grand National is different to someone gripped by debt due to unhealthy daily gambling addictions. Yes, yeah, very much so. I'm sure people who end up with gambling problems, obviously they start with, maybe on a small scale or something. I think some of the online gambling companies now, they give you a free bet to get you to create an account. And it is genuinely a free bet. So you can go on, put this free bet on a football game, win, and win like £10. And obviously it's a loss leader. They think it's worth it. So there's someone I know actually who just signs up for lots of different online betting companies, takes the free bet, tries it, and wins a bit of money, and then doesn't do any more, which is fine. But the company knows that for as many people as do that, there'll be more than enough people that they will make money out of. So yeah, interesting issue. Or restorative justice. I don't watch television at all, but I occasionally put Radio 4 on in the car when I can bear it. And it probably heard me say, I normally play the game. I start counting 1, 2, 3, and I count how many seconds it is until they're on to racism, sexism, LGBT, climate change, refugees, immigration, or equality. It doesn't matter what the actual topic is. The topic could be the history of chocolate or whatever. But these will be the themes coming in. And it's normally about 3 seconds before they're on to one of these things. I mean, it's unlistenable. It's terrible. Anyway, I put it on the other day, and they were talking about restorative justice. The idea that someone's committed a crime, okay, they're sent to prison. But also, if the victim is amenable to it, the victim would maybe meet up or receive a letter from the culprit, from the perpetrator, in which they might apologize, or explain what was happening in their lives, express good wishes or whatever to them. And sometimes this then results in a meeting, and that can be very emotional and powerful. It can help the perpetrator to realize what they've done. Sometimes it can help the victim as well to move on from it. And it's quite heartwarming stories can come out from that. Now, I think in those situations, a victim should never feel under any obligation or pressure whatsoever to have any interaction with their attacker, for example, if they don't want it. We must not have the situation where it's, if you're a good person, then you'd meet the person who murdered the rest of your family and, have a chat with them. If someone doesn't want to do that, then they don't want to do it. Whether or not you think probably would be best, it actually might be quite noble if they did. It might be quite useful. Doesn't matter what you think or I think. No one should feel under pressure to do that. But then, of course, this BBC program, it's quite a sort of liberal idea, restorative justice, because ideally it should be alongside a proper justice system with punishment. Okay, but what a lot of very liberally minded people want to do, they want to replace punishments with restorative justice. So you commit a terrible crime, and if you can make friends with the person again and apologize and have a big hug, then that's really what it's all about. We don't need a punishment. No, that's totally wrong. But the BBC, of course, love restorative justice because they're very liberally minded. And this program went along, a couple of heartwarming stories. Then what did they get to? They said some schools have been experimenting with it, and it's been having great results. It's quite early days, but some very encouraging results of this being used in schools. I thought, oh dear. They've obviously never been to Scotland, because in Scotland, introducing restorative practices has been a total unmitigated disaster, and has resulted in a huge breakdown in discipline across high schools and primary schools. So huge problems. But the BBC seems totally oblivious to that. So the BBC are busy promoting restorative approaches to schools in England when they've been a total disaster in Scotland. But that's the BBC. That's the BBC. They know which way they're pushing. They can barely conceive that there could be another side of the argument to it. They're just obviously pushing their agenda. And then the next program that came up was speaking to women who were part of the Greenham Common anti-nuclear weapon peace camp decades ago, talking about their experience and singing their songs together and whatever. So yeah, classic BBC. It's not that they're lying. It's that they choose to give a warm, welcoming platform to people who are on their wavelength. You will never get a program about, say, we're going to talk to people involved in the pro-life movement back in the 1960s who were opposing the original Abortion Act. So we're going to sit down with these people, tell them what they remember. They can tell us about their camaraderie and how important they felt it was and how they were mistreated. And we're going to hear all these warm, fantastic stories, and they can make their own program about it. Fat chance. Never going to happen. But the Greenham Common ladies, because they're sort of on the BBC's wavelength, they'll get a nice, warm documentary where they're very much humanized. They can tell their story, and the casual listener will just feel sympathetic to them. But that's the BBC. Yes, that has indeed. Talk of gay marriage being repealed in the USA. Now, I've heard a bit about this. Now, let's try and remember the details. I think, roughly speaking, some states have started looking into it. About some states were forced to introduce same-sex marriage because the Supreme Court in America said you have to have it. So I think some states are sort of making it clear that they don't actually want it. And the suggestion is that when Roe versus Wade was overturned with abortions, in other words, the Supreme Court said that the state government, federal government, so the federal government cannot decide the issue of abortion. This should have been decided on a state level. Whereas Roe versus Wade said actually at a federal level, it can be decided. We can make every state into legalize abortion. We can do that. But then the Supreme Court said, actually, no, that was a mistake. The central power has not got the authority to impose abortion on every state. There's no right being upheld or whatever. So that was a mistake. And some people in America are now saying, well, this is the same with same-sex marriage. There is no grounds for the federal authority to impose same-sex marriage on states. It should have been up to states to decide. And it's not impossible. There's a growing movement that if that legal challenge would need to come along first, but if that legal challenge was brought, that would be a big issue because it would be very, very much in the public eye. And if it was successful, then a substantial number of American states would ditch gay marriage immediately. And again, just like Roe versus Wade was a massive issue, worldwide issue, this would also be a massive, massive issue. And it would be a huge boost for people like campaigners who oppose same-sex marriage all around the world. It would really put it back on the agenda. Now, in the UK, younger generations tend to be less in favor of same-sex marriage. Quite surprising, isn't it? So the very oldest generations are not so keen on it. Then people right through their maybe sort of 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, maybe even 70s, they're absolutely for it. Very, very, very keen on it. But then you get to the youngest generations, like up to 25 or up to 30, up to 18, whatever, they're not so sure. The approval rating is going down significantly. So watch this space. I think there could be changes ahead on that front. Right, so mention that. I'll leave that one till next week. Right, we'll just go 5 minutes. I'll just talk about a couple of things here. I was looking at Murdo Fraser's online profile, if you like, for another reason. Murdo Fraser, the Conservative MSP, is a Christian, is a Rangers fan, Protestant. So I came across a couple of motions he'd submitted or signed to the Scottish Parliament, in the Scottish Parliament. Now, a motion is just some text that's put forward, and then it just gets recorded in the Parliament. So you could, if you were an MSP, you could submit a motion saying that Susie in the local post office is really smiley every morning and she offers a great service to all the customers. So well done, Susie, in Cumbernauld Post Office. And then that will be published in the proceedings of the Parliament, and that'll be fine. Now, if someone else thought, no, Susie is terrible, she's really useless, she's really rude, so they could put forward a counter motion saying, actually, Susie in Cumbernauld Post Office, she was really obnoxious to me, so I think she's really terrible. And that would just be recorded as well. I mean, there's no process. There's not normally a debate about these things. They just go on in the background. Anyway, Murdo Fraser put one forward here congratulating Rangers Football Club on being such a brilliant team and winning lots of stuff. Now, I've seen one for Celtic as well, in exactly the same sort of tone. Now, this goes on to talk about some charity work, okay, and Celtic ones do as well. And it's probably not just Rangers and Celtic. There'll be other football things as well. And I just think, in fact, there was a debate in the Parliament, a whole debate focused on celebrating Celtic winning whatever they won in was it 1960s or something? I don't even know what it was. They had a debate about a football team winning a competition decades earlier. I just think, really, this is not what the Parliament is for. Now, if you're an MSP and you're dead keen on football, then fine. You tweet away about it. That's fine. Go and watch the matches, talk about it. Great. But it's nothing to do with the Parliament. Absolutely nothing. Particularly in Scotland, where there's a sectarianism issue. So Murdo Fraser, Protestant, conservative, unionist, putting forward a motion about Rangers, we're probably better off without it, aren't we? Go and watch the games, be a big fan, Murdo, wear the scarf, but don't try and bring it into the Parliament. It doesn't do any good at all. But then here's another one. So this was a motion, I think, submitted by Murdo Fraser. Now, I find this, see what you think about this. I find this very interesting. So this motion was countersigned, was supported by a big gaggle of conservative MSPs. They're almost all conservatives, plus John Mason. And this is commemorating the 450th anniversary of the death of John Knox. Now, actually thinking about it, I mean, you could say that's actually neutral, because some people might want to commemorate his death. People might want to commemorate his life and work. So the text. The Parliament notes that the year 2022 marks the 450th anniversary of the death of John Knox, who died in Edinburgh on 24th of November 1972. So same basically founding father of the Protestant Revelation in Scotland, co-authored the Scots Confession, which was ratified in the Scottish Parliament. I'm having trouble reading the bottom because the software is putting a block over it. And it ends up saying, talking about the influence of John Knox and basically promoting the message that salvation is through faith in Jesus Christ alone. Now, what I think about that is, I'm not interested whether you agree with it or disagree with this. I just think, what's that doing in the Parliament? But John Knox, I mean, if you're of certain Protestant persuasions, you might think John Knox was a very positive figure. If you're a Catholic, you might think John Knox was an extremely negative figure. He was very, very hostile towards Catholics at a time when there was violent persecution. On the other, and I think even for Protestants, they'd have to look at some of John Knox's statements and actions and think, "Whoa, that was too far." But some people might see him like theologically as being on the right side, and it played a key role in the promotion of Protestantism. So some people will see John Knox as a very positive figure. Some other people in Scotland will definitely will not see him as a positive figure. This is a religious question. So what's this doing in the Scottish Parliament? Why have we got a motion in the Scottish Parliament saying that about salvation through faith in Jesus? Is it up to the Scottish Parliament to decide whether or not salvation is through faith in Jesus Christ alone? Absolutely not. I couldn't care less what the Scottish Parliament decides. I couldn't care less what motion they agree on, partly because they don't have any authority in these matters, and partly because it's just not helpful to bring these things into politics. So we've got Murdo Fraser bringing in like Rangers, unionism, Protestantism, and just trying to bring it into the Parliament, trying to get like his tribe to sign up for those things. But it's not helpful, particularly against the background of sectarianism. It's not helpful. I mean, I'm sure I could look through. I said they had a whole debate about Celtic winning something. It's not helpful at all. This is not politics. Politics is about how can we run Scotland better. Okay, what policy ideas have you got? Not which figure from like 400 years ago do you like or do you think was positive or not. That's not bringing anything positive into the Parliament. So this motion will have wound up some people in the Parliament, or some people outside the Parliament as well. They'll be quite annoyed with that. They'll think, no, you shouldn't be doing that. But to what end? What's been achieved there? Nothing whatsoever. Murdo Fraser wants to go and try and persuade some Catholics to be Protestants. Go for it, Murdo. However you like, just not in the Parliament. Vice versa as well. Just not in the motions of the Parliament. Right, I think that might be about it. I'll mention this very, very quickly, then I'll finish. This was in the media recently. Corridor wandering pupils. Pupils who go to school, get registered, but then don't go to any lessons because they just wander around in the corridor instead. Why don't they go to the lessons? Well, obviously because they don't want to. I mean, what a stupid question. But if a kid doesn't want to go to lessons, he just doesn't go. A friend of mine was telling me about this in the high school he works in quite recently. And he was saying there's a significant number of children who just do not go to a single lesson. So a teacher will say to them, now let's have a look at your timetable, Fred. Let's see. Now you've got French now. Shall I show you where it is? Shall we go to French together? I'll show you where the French lesson is, shall I? No, I'm going to stay here play on my phone. Oh, no, come on. It'd be really good if you came to the lesson. Good to learn things. You might enjoy it. Now leave me alone. So they leave them alone. So they sit under the staircase or whatever. And that's their school day. That's their school week. That's their school term, their school year, their school career. I mean, is it not shocking that this is allowed to happen? That the schools have got so little authority, they can't put their foot down and say, you are going to your lesson. Everyone goes to lessons in this school. You should be in that place. So you get there now or you'll regret it. And if pupils won't get there, then they do regret it, either with punishments within that school or they'll be expelled. They'll have to leave because you're just not going to have it. Now, at this point, someone will always say, oh, what if they're having a really bad day? You never know what's happening. There might be all sorts of problems there. Okay, we'll look into that. Absolutely. Let's try and find out if there are any underlying issues and let's try and deal with them. I think ultimately, though, no matter what's going on in the background, it's not helpful for that child to be spending their days and weeks wandering classrooms, basically playing games on their phone. That's basically what they'll be doing. So it's not education, it's counter-education. It's harmful for children to be in school doing that. So why is this not a massive national scandal? Again, I think that's just the state of Scottish education. It's not in a head teacher's interest to say, oh, by the way, discipline's broken down in my school. Kids are just wandering around and not going to class. And that's hardly going to boost your career, is it? So these things get smoothed over. Expectations go down and down and down. And you end up with the teachers and people in school, senior staff as well, who end up thinking, well, the easy thing is just let them do it. And we can't control them. We can't make them go. So just let them wander around. And that's the best we can do. So thank you very much for joining me this evening. Look out for my video about Rose Doherty tomorrow. Scottish Family Party Conference, 8th of November. Meeting in Edinburgh on Thursday this week. So it'd be great to see you there if you can make it. Right. Thanks for watching. Good night.